Important thing for the engineer initially would be in what's called tracking. And there you just get the good sound as accurate as you can of whatever was coming out of the amplifier or the voice or the acoustic guitar or whatever. So setting the mic up properly, setting it in the room properly to get the best sound on each track, to me, would be the most important job of the engineer.
Oh, the miles that lie between us. Singing my love when the cold wind is blowing and he longs for.
Hi, I'm David Sandage, and I'm the owner/engineer of the Well House Studios in Donaldson, Arkansas. I've been open here for, 6 years maybe. Started the studio because my wife threw me out of the house because bands were coming in there to record upstairs. And I've been in music. I've been doing sound since mid-70s. Spent a little time in Nashville, which is where I learned to set up mics and start doing multi-track recording. And I started out just like running sound for bands, for groups back in the mid-70s when I was still in high school. Okay. And running sound for local bands, things like that. In '75 I graduated. That summer I went to Nashville to visit with Norbert Ward, who was a friend of my dad's, is how I knew him, but he was the chief recording engineer for Columbia Studios, main CBS studios in Nashville. And Norbert, like I said, was a chief engineer. He taught me to set up microphones. He let me work in Studio A and B, both. Studio A was the big fancy, all the wood and the glass and everything. Studio B was the main work downstairs, and they just had two brand new 24-track Ampex reel-to-reels. The tape was about that wide, looked like cloth going through there, and it was all patch panels back then, and you'd patch this signal into that preamp and did all of that sort of thing. I took guitar lessons, piano lessons when I was a kid, and then my brother taught me to play guitar. And, I never got to be, I was 20, 30 years ago when I was playing a lot, I got to be an okay guitar player. I wasn't going to make a living out of it, but I wasn't bad. That's when I went to Nashville. And Norbert told me that some of his engineers were musicians. Some of his engineers were electrical engineers. But he said the best was a combination. So I ended up going in the Air Force in an electronics field, in the most advanced electronics that I could get into at that point in time in the Air Force. And so when my plan was, when I came out, I was going to go back to Nashville. I ended up being married, had one kid and one on the way, and continuing to work for General Dynamics or, electronics related to the military seemed to be a more stable and sure career path than the recording, but I never got it out of my system. I ended up going to work for General Dynamics, moving to Camden, and that stayed until around '90. They closed up. They went to Arizona or someplace, and I moved back to here. And the tornado in '97 got my house, all my equipment, everything ended up out in the field out there. So my kids were quite a bit older. My son had learned to play bass and guitar, and he was starting to write. So I bought a little mixer that by now, that was the early digital stuff. And you could record direct to hard drive. It was only like 10 or 12 bit, or it might have even been 8-bit. But anyway, my first digital work. And of course, in the Air Force, I learned computer repair and programming. Then I got my degree in computer science. So I had the digital side, from the electronics background, and I'd always done the audio work, so it was a pretty easy transition for me. The word got out that I could do that, and full bands started coming and setting up upstairs in my house, and my wife about kicked me out, so I built this studio out here and moved out here, and then word of mouth, is how the business grew. Mainly I'm a recording engineer. I will produce the album in terms of a couple of those. I've been the sole creative final word on the mix, that sort of thing, and the general sound. Even to a rap album. There's a guy coming later tonight that did a rap track a couple of weeks ago, and you know I'm having to learn all that. That's not my forte. It's not, you know, but I've learned enough about it that I heard him do it, and he just didn't have the attitude that he needed to have for that particular song. And I told him, I said, look, that was a good cut. There was no mistakes, but you know, back up from the mic a little and say it like you mean it, you know, and get into it more. And he was like, yeah, he heard it. He played it back and he goes, yeah, you're right. And then he did that, you know. So I have creative input and all of that sort of thing. But I don't go out there and get on tour dates or any of that sort of stuff. You'd be surprised how many studios in Nashville are no bigger than this one room. A lot of them are garage or bedroom conversions. It's the equipment. It's a good preamp, a good what they call the vocal chain. Your microphone, the shape and sound of your room, and your preamp, and then the digital to analog conversion is what's important. So you could do it, you can make a studio in your bedroom. I ended up out here because my wife kicked me out of the house from the noise from the drum sets, you know. If you can, to me, all right, and I work more with acoustic bands than I do, especially like punk rock and that sort of thing. But in an acoustic set, you want to be able to hear each instrument clearly. You don't want one dominating the others. When a fiddle plays the lead or a mandolin picks, you want that to slide in and slide back out, you know, but overall they maintain, you know, good balance. You want it to be clear, you want it to be understandable. Then you want the voice, depending on the style of music, to lay right on top of that or right in with it, you know, depending on, and then the same deal when you mix vocals. Some people want the harmonies, right? If it's like a barbershop quartet, you pretty much want everybody the same volume. If it's one of those backing type of harmonies, then you want the lead out front, you know. And digital recording is the key, because used to, you had each track, say you had a regular old tape recorder, you know, and you had stereo on one half and stereo on the other. For in the studio, they'd all go the same direction. You'd have 4 tracks on a piece of tape. That's all the individual tracks you could record. Then you'd have to mix, say, 3 of those and drop them over on that first track. Then you'd have 3 more to work with. You could take 2 of those and drop them here. So now we got 5 tracks. Then you could just do 6 and 7. You know, now in this little studio that costs not a lot, I've got $4,000 or $5,000 of mics and preamps in here. I can do work that I could not have done even with 24-track Ampex machines back in the mid-70s. Hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment.
Let's lay out in the sun till we both go blind.
Was one of them obviously was how did you get started in the music and entertainment industry?
Right. Sort of always grew up in it. My brother grew up in, he's 14 years older than me, so he was playing 50s music in 50s bands in the 50s, you know.